Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. We're going to do something a little different to kick this deep dive off.
Right.
I want you to imagine you are walking into a corridor. The year is 1498.
Okay, 1498. So set the scene for us. Where are we, geographically speaking?
We are in Seville,
Hmm.
in the south of Spain. Now, outside, the sun is just blistering. It's that dry, relentless Andalusian heat that, just bakes the clay roofs.
Right.
But in here, it's freezing. You're in the Castillo de San Jorge.
The castle is St. George.
Exactly. And it sits right on the bank of the Guadalquivir River. And because of where it sits, the water table is practically, well, it's seeping through the floor.
So it's a damp.
It's not just damp. The air is thick. It's heavy. It smells like wet stone that hasn't seen the sun in, I don't know, maybe 200 years. You know that specific smell?
Oh, yeah, like a basement that's been flooded and then just left.
Yes, that heavy, mildewy sort of mineral smell.
It sticks to your clothes. It signals that you are underground, even if you technically aren't.
Precisely. And the walls are sweating. I mean, actual moisture is beating on the masonry. You're walking down this corridor. It's narrow, it's claustrophobic, and the only light is coming from a single flickering torch.
Held by a guard, I'm guessing.
Yeah, carried by a guard about 20 feet ahead of you. You can't even see where the corridor ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hear something.
What kind of sound?
It's a sound that stops you dead in your tracks. It's rhythmic. It's low. At first, your brain, it tries to make sense of it. Is it a machine? A pump? The river echoing?
Something mechanical.
Right. But then the hairs on your arms stand up because your biology recognizes it before your brain does.
It's human.
It is the sound of a human being in absolute extreme distress.
Yeah.
But not screaming. That's the chilling part. It's the sound of someone who has stopped screaming because they have nothing left.
Oh, wow.
It's a guttural, repetitive noise of just pure, exhausted suffering.
That is a terrifying way to open.
Oh,
but you're triggering something very specific there. That physiological response you're describing, that's the amygdala hijacking the brain. We are hardwired, evolutionarily, to recognize the distress calls of our own species. It's a survival mechanism. It triggers fight or flight instantly.
And for the next hour, we are going to walk toward that sound. We aren't just going to look at it. We are going to disassemble it.
Right.
Because the thing making that sound isn't just a person in pain. It is the end product of a system, a very specific, very sophisticated system.
And that is the key word right there, system. We have a whole stack of sources here today. Historical accounts from the 15th century, modern psychological breakdowns, court records, and they all point to one, frankly, uncomfortable truth.
Which is?
The Spanish Inquisition wasn't a mob. It wasn't a chaotic riot of peasants with pitchforks.
So the bureaucracy?
It was a high-functioning corporate bureaucracy. It was a science. I mean, it was calibrated, it was documented in triplicate, and it was supervised by physicians who treated torture not as a punishment, but as a medical procedure to extract the truth.
The bureaucracy of pain. That's our lens for this deep dive. We're going to investigate how you industrialize suffering.
Fitting. And deeply disturbing.
Now, to help us understand this machine, we can't just talk about victims in the abstract. That's too easy to tune out.
You need a human face.
We need a guide. We need someone to walk down that corridor with. So I want to introduce you to Diego.
Diego Alvarez.
Right. Diego is our narrative anchor today. He is a real case study drawn from the composite records of this time. He's 34 years old. He's a merchant in Seville. He sells cloth, maybe some high-end leather goods.
So he's middle class, he's respectable, he contributes to the economy, a solid citizen.
Very respectable. His family has lived in Seville for 3 generations. He's a baptized Christian. He goes to Mass. He pays his taxes. He has a wife, Isabel, and 2 little girls, 7 and 4 years old.
So he's just a normal guy.
He's the guy you wave to in the market. He's the guy who complains about the heat but loves his city.
He sounds like the ideal citizen.
He is, until he isn't. In our timeline, it's a Tuesday morning. Diego kisses his kids goodbye. He tells Isabel he'll be back for dinner. He walks out the door to check on a shipment of silk, and he never comes back.
Just like that.
Snapped right off the street. 2 men approach him. They don't shout. They don't make a scene. They just say, "Come with us."
And because of who they are.
Familiars of the Holy Office, Diego goes. He has to.
And here is where we need to look at the why. Because usually when you get arrested by a secret police force, you assume you did something major.
Right. Treason, plotting to kill the king, stealing from the treasury, something big.
You assume there's a dossier on you that's thick as a brick.
Exactly.
But Diego Diego is there because of his grocery list.
This is the part of the research that really just blew my mind, the banality of the accusation. Tell us why Diego is in the Castillo.
Okay, so Diego is what's known as a new Christian, a converso. His grandparents were Jewish, but they converted 50 years ago. But the Inquisition suspects he is a Judaizer, someone who is secretly practicing the old faith.
And the evidence.
It's not a manifesto. It's not a weapon cache. A neighbor reported that Diego's family lights candles on Friday nights.
Candles?
Candles. Another report said his wife buys meat from a butcher who drains the blood a certain way. Another said they never, ever see the family buying pork sausages.
So his diet is on trial. His kitchen is a crime scene.
His domestic habits are on trial. In 1498, these are huge red flags. These are signs of heresy. But here is the kicker, and this is something we see in the sources repeatedly, who reported him.
The neighbor.
A neighbor who, it turns out, borrowed a significant sum of money from Diego last winter and hadn't paid it back.
Ah. Okay, I see where this is going.
It's so perverse, isn't it?
Yep.
If Diego is convicted of heresy, the Inquisition seizes all of his assets, the house, the shop, the ledgers.
Which means the deck.
The debt he is owed is effectively erased or absorbed by the crown. So you have to ask, was this neighbor a religious zealot protecting the faith? Or was this just a terrifyingly effective financial strategy?
It's the weaponization of piety. You can use the church to clear your balance sheet.
Exactly. And Diego doesn't even know who accused him. That's standard operating procedure. The Inquisition keeps the accuser anonymous to protect them.
So Diego is just sitting in the dark, wondering which of his friends betrayed him, while the neighbor is probably sleeping soundly.
It's Kafkaesque.
So Diego was taken to the Castillo, he's stripped of his clothes, he's terrified, and suddenly he's in a room. And this isn't a dungeon in the movie sense, you know, with skeletons hanging from the walls.
No, it's an office, a procedure room.
There is a Dominican friar sitting at a desk with a quill and paper. There is a physician standing by the wall. And there's a man in a leather apron. The executioner, the verdugo.
And the friar is calm. I think that's the detail that chills me the most in these accounts. He's not screaming at Diego. He's speaking in a measured, almost kind voice.
What's he saying?
He tells Diego that the church loves him, that they want to save his soul, that these instruments surrounding them are instruments of salvation.
Instruments of salvation. That is some heavy, heavy branding.
It's their internal logic. If you believe the soul is eternal, then destroying the body to save the soul is actually an act of charity. It's twisted, but you have to understand that they believed they were the good guys. They believed they were surgeons removing a tumor.
So Diego says what any of us would say. I'm innocent. We don't eat pork because it upsets my wife's stomach. I'm a faithful Christian.
And the friar just sighs, looks at the notary, and nods. And the process begins.
This brings us to the core of our deep dive, the machinery. We are going to walk through the escalation because what happens to Diego isn't just random violence. It is a ladder.
A ladder of suffering.
Right. And we're going to climb it rung by rung. We have 8 specific methods identified in the sources, ordered from psychological baseline all the way up to total annihilation.
And I want to flag something for you, the listener. As we go through these, look for the calibration. Notice how the Inquisition doesn't just go to maximum pain immediately. They use pain like a dial. They turn it up one notch at a time.
Let's start with the first notch. Method number 1, this one. Honestly, when I first read it, I thought, okay, that's not so bad. It doesn't even involve physical pain. It's called the San Benito.
A San Benito, yes. This is the weaponization of identity.
Explain this. Diego is standing there, probably waiting for the rack, and instead they just hand him a shirt.
Essentially, yes. It's a yellow tunic, rough fabric, like sackcloth. It scratches, it's uncomfortable, but the comfort isn't the point.
The design is the point.
The design is the point. It's painted with bright, vivid red flames, sometimes demons pitchforking sinners into hell, sometimes snakes.
So...
Very. They force Diego to put this on, and then they don't torture him in a dark room. They walk him outside.
Into the public square. This is the auto da fe.
The act of faith. It's a public procession. But think about the geography here. Diego lives in Seville. He knows everyone, so they march him through his own neighborhood.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he's walking past his own customers.
He's walking past the people he buys milk from. He's walking past the guys he drinks wine with. He's walking past his rivals. And everyone is required to be there.
The church mandates attendance.
It's a spectator sport. It's a public holiday.
So imagine being Diego. He's wearing this ridiculous, humiliating yellow sack with demons painted on it. He's walking down the street he grew up on. The shame must be nuclear.
It's civil death. That's the term historians use. In that moment, Diego isn't being physically hurt, but his life is being systematically dismantled. His reputation is vaporized.
Who is going to buy leather from a heretic?
Who is going to lend money to a man marked by the devil? His business is gone.
Instantly.
But it goes so much deeper. We have to talk about his family. Because Isabel and the two little girls, they are forced to watch.
They have to stand in the front row and see their dad like this.
Yes. And the crowd knows who they are. The crowd is looking at the little girls and thinking, those are the Judier's daughters.
And in 1498, that's not just social awkwardness. That's a life sentence.
It's a curse. The stain of heresy was considered hereditary. Those little girls, their marriage prospects just evaporated. No respectable Christian family will marry into a bloodline touched by the Inquisition.
So Diego is walking, and with every single step, he's realizing he has destroyed his children's future.
That's arguably worse than physical pain. If you hurt me, I can take it. But if you hurt my kid's future, that breaks you in a way nothing else can.
And the Inquisition knew that. They banked on it. The San Benito was designed to break the will before the executioner even lifted a finger.
And here's the detail that really stuck with me. The tunic doesn't disappear when the parade is over.
What do they do with it?
They take it off Diego, and they hang it in the local parish church.
Like a trophy.
Like a warning. They inscribe his name on it, Diego Alvarez, heretic. And it stays there. We have records of these tunics hanging in churches for 60, 70 years.
So Diego's grandchildren
will walk into that church for Sunday Mass, look up at the wall, and see their grandfather's shame hanging there. It is a multi-generational branding. It ensures the family never, ever recovers.
It's almost like modern cancel culture, but codified into law and, hung on a wall for a century.
It's the original cancellation, total social isolation.
But let's say Diego is stubborn. Or, more accurately, let's say he's innocent and he refuses to lie. He wears the shirt, he takes the walk of shame, but he comes back to the cell and says, I still didn't do it.
Then the friar nods again. The psychological pressure didn't work, so they moved to the physical. Method number 2. Flogging.
Now, flogging seems, I don't want to say standard, but it's common in history. Romans did it. The British Navy did it. Why is it important here?
The context is everything. In the Inquisition, flogging was the warm-up. It was the baseline.
The appetizer to the main course.
Horrifyingly, yes. They strip the prisoner to the waist, bind them to a post or a wooden horse, and they use a whip, sometimes leather, sometimes a bundle of knotted rods.
And we aren't talking about a spanking. This is serious.
No. The skin splits almost immediately. We're talking about tearing flesh, exposing the muscle layer. It is agonizing. But the psychological message was, this is the least we can do.
It's a calibration check.
Exactly. The Inquisitor is effectively saying, Diego, look at how much this hurts. This is the ground floor. We have a penthouse of pain waiting for you, and we haven't even started the elevator.
That's terrifying because it implies an infinite capacity for escalation.
And that's why many people confessed right there, not just because their back was bleeding, but because they did the math. They realized, if this is step 2, I cannot survive step 8.
But Diego survives. He grits his teeth. He takes the lashes. He's thrown back in his cell, bleeding, shivering. He still hasn't named names.
So the bureaucracy turns the page in the manual. And we move to section 2 of our roadmap, the architecture of suffering.
This is where things stop being brute force and start getting mechanical.
And where they start to weaponize the body's own basic needs against itself.
Method number 3, the heretic's fork. I have to be honest. Looking at the diagram of this thing, it looks so simple. It's just a metal rod. But when you read how it works...
It's elegant in its cruelty. It's a double-ended fork. 2 sharp prongs at the top, 2 sharp prongs at the bottom.
And where does it go?
It's strapped around the neck. The bottom prongs rest right here on the sternum, the breastbone. The top prongs are positioned right under the chin.
So you're propped open, your head is locked in place?
You are locked. You cannot lower your head. If you drop your chin even an inch, the top prongs pierce the soft tissue of your throat, and the bottom prongs drive into your chest bone.
And they just leave you like that?
They leave you, hands bound behind your back. Maybe you're standing, maybe sitting. But think about what your body has to do eventually.
You have to sleep.
You have to sleep. Especially after the stress of the arrest, the parade, the flogging. Your brain is desperate for shutdown.
But you can't.
The moment you drift off, what happens? Your muscles relax, your head nods forward.
And the spikes bite.
You jolt awake because you just stabbed yourself in the throat. The heretic's fork is a machine designed to weaponize sleep. It turns the body's need for rest into an act of self-mutilation.
That is just diabolical because it's not the torturer hurting you anymore, it's you hurting you.
Precisely. It creates a cycle of exhaustion and pain that breaks the mind faster than almost anything else. Modern interrogation experts will tell you, sleep deprivation is more effective than physical beating. It degrades cognitive function.
Yeah.
You start hallucinating, paranoia sets in. You will say anything, agree to anything, just to close your eyes for 10 minutes.
And there's a detail on the fork itself, right? Little inscription.
Yes, engraved on the metal right in front of your eyes, one Latin word, abuto.
Which means I recant.
It's staring at you. It's a bargain. It's saying, just say the word, just say you recant, and we take the metal away. You can sleep.
Your soul for a nap.
That's the trade.
Mm.
And after 3 days of no sleep, that trade starts to look very, very reasonable.
It's heavy, and we're only at method 3.
We are just getting started. Diego hasn't even seen the ropes yet.
Okay, we need to take a breath here. We're going to move to the next level of escalation. The point where they stop waiting for you to get tired and start physically dismantling your joints.
The garrucha.
Or, as it's better known, the strappado.
This is where we see the science aspect come into play, specifically regarding anatomy. They knew what they were doing.
Walk us through the setup. What happens to Diego here?
They tie his hands behind his back. Not in front, but behind. That's key. They attach a rope to his wrists. The rope goes up to a heavy iron pulley bolted to the ceiling.
And they hoist him up.
They pull. Diego is lifted off the ground. Now think about the mechanics of the shoulder joint. It is a ball and socket held together by a cuff of muscles and tendons. It is designed to lift things, not to support the entire weight of the body from that backward angle.
So as soon as his feet leave the ground,
the pain is blinding. The ball of the humerus is being levered out of the socket. The muscles are stretching beyond their elasticity. It's a screaming, tearing sensation that radiates across the chest and down the arms. Both shoulders dislocate almost immediately.
But the Inquisition, being the innovators they were, didn't stop at just hanging you there, did they?
No, they had variations. They called them the drop or squassation.
This is the physics part.
They would hoist the prisoner all the way to the ceiling. Diego was dangling there, 15 feet in the air. Then the executioner just lets go of the rope.
He falls.
He free falls. But, and this is the crucial part, the executioner grabs the rope again just before Diego's feet hit the floor.
That sudden stop.
It's basic physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. The sudden stop multiplies Diego's body weight by a factor of 5 or 6.
Oh my God.
And all that force transfers directly into the shoulders. It shreds the tendons. It tears the ligaments. It rips the muscles.
Oh.
Witnesses reported that the sound was loud, like a dry branch snapping.
Yeah.
A loud, sickening pop that just echoed in the chamber.
And if that somehow wasn't enough,
they added the pendulum. They would tie weights to the prisoner's feet. Stones. 20 pounds, 50 pounds, sometimes up to 100 pounds.
So now you have Diego, shoulders already dislocated, hanging by his wrists, with 100 pounds of stone dragging his ankles toward the floor.
It turns the body into a vertical rack. It creates permanent disability. And this is important to the bureaucracy theme. These injuries were lasting. If Diego was eventually released, which did happen sometimes, he couldn't go back to cutting leather. He couldn't lift his arms. He was crippled for life.
I want to pause here and go back to that narrative check-in we talked about. Imagine Diego hanging there. His shoulders are effectively destroyed. The pain is just a white-hot, blinding light, and below him stands that friar.
The calm voice.
Oh.
Do you practice Jewish rites? Who else lights candles on Friday? Just tell us, Diego. We can make this stop.
It's the contrast that gets me. The violence is so extreme, but the questioning is so bureaucratic. It's like a tax audit happening in the middle of a car crash.
That's the bureaucracy of pain. The Inquisitor isn't angry. He's just following the procedure. If the Strappado doesn't work, he checks the manual and moves to the next station.
Which brings us to Section 3, systematic dismantling of the body. Because apparently destroying the shoulders wasn't enough. We have to talk about method number 5, the one everyone knows, the patro, the rack.
The rack is the iconic image of the Inquisition for a reason. It was the most commonly used device. The setup is a wooden frame. The prisoner lays on their back, ropes are tied to wrists and ankles, and those ropes are attached to rollers at the top and bottom of the frame.
And they turn the crank.
They turn the rollers. The body is pulled in 2 directions, bones separate, cartilage tears. But the Spanish Inquisition had a specific variation, a Spanish twist, if you will.
What did they do differently?
They didn't just pull the limbs. They used thin, sharp ropes, called cordalis, and wound them around the arms and legs themselves. As the rollers turned and the tension increased, these ropes would bite into the flesh.
So it's not just stretching you, it's cutting you at the same time.
It would slice through the skin and muscle, sometimes right down to the bone. There are accounts of the ropes literally disappearing inside the wounds because the tension was so high.
Jesus.
But I want to highlight something else about the rack. A psychological tactic called the trissio.
The Trissio.
It's the psychological weaponization of the rack. The Inquisition manuals actually recommended this. They would bring a new prisoner, someone like Diego, into the room just to watch someone else on the rack first.
Oh, that's cruel.
Or even worse, just to listen.
Hearing it from the hallway.
Exactly. Imagine standing outside that heavy wooden door. You can't see what's happening. You just hear the mechanism cranking, click, click, click. And you hear the screaming. And then you hear that wet, tearing sound of ligaments.
The anticipation becomes the torture.
It's a form of persuasion. One notary recorded a prisoner confessing to everything and several things he was not accused of, just standing outside the door. He never even touched the rack. The sound of it broke him.
But let's say Diego is made of sterner stuff. He's on the rack, he's broken, he's bleeding, but he still hasn't confessed. The Inquisitors realize they're risking killing him if they keep stretching him.
And remember, they can't kill him yet. They need a confession. So they shift tactics.
They move from mechanical destruction to simulating death. Method number 6, the toca.
Which we know by a different name today.
Waterboarding.
Yes.
It's shocking to see it here in the 15th century. I tend to think of that as a much more modern technique.
The mechanics are virtually identical. They strapped the prisoner to a trestle, often with the head lower than the feet. They forced a thin cloth, the toca, into the mouth and down into the throat. Then they poured water slowly from a jar onto the cloth.
How does this work physiologically? I mean, what's happening to the body?
The cloth swells, it blocks the airway. The water saturates the cloth and fills the nasal passages. The body goes into immediate, uncontrollable panic mode. It's the drowning reflex. Your brain screams, I am dying, I am underwater, I am dead.
But you aren't actually drowning. You're not inhaling water into your lungs.
You are drowning on dry land. Your lungs heave, your diaphragm spasms trying to expel water that keeps pouring. The Inquisition could pour up to 8 quarts of water in a single session.
8 quarts? That's 2 gallons of water?
The prisoners would bloat. They would vomit violently, often choking on their own vomit. The sensation is indistinguishable from death by drowning.
And why did the bureaucracy love this method so much?
Because it leaves no marks.
Clean reporting.
Exactly. If a physician looked at Diego after the rack, he'd see torn muscles and cuts. After the toca, maybe some redness in the eyes, a sore throat. But no broken bones, no blood. They could inflict the terror of death without damaging the goods, so to speak.
It's just so cynical. They treated it like a standard cross-examination.
Edward Peters, a historian on this topic, noted that the Inquisitors would take notes during the waterboarding. The scribe is sitting there, dipping his quill, while a man is drowning 3 feet away from him.
Yeah.
It was just a routine.
Okay, we are deep in the darkness now. But believe it or not, there are 2 more methods. And these push the boundaries of what I thought people were capable of inventing. Section 4, the boundaries of imagination.
We've reached the point where the Inquisition stops trying to extract information and starts trying to annihilate the will completely. Method number 7, the Spanish donkey.
Even the name sounds awful. What is it?
Imagine a wooden beam shaped like a wedge or a roof peak. The top edge sharp, not knife sharp, but a sharp wooden angle pointing upward.
Okay, a triangle beam.
The prisoner is stripped naked and forced to sit astride this beam, like riding a horse. But the saddle is a sharp wedge.
So your entire body weight is resting on.
The groin, the most sensitive soft tissue, the perineum. The legs hang down the sides, unable to touch the floor.
That sounds agonizing enough.
But that's just the start. They add the weights again. They tie those stones to the ankle.
Oh, no.
Gravity pulls the legs down. The wedge slices upward. It cuts into the nerves, the soft tissue. It essentially begins to split the person in half from the bottom up, slowly.
It's total annihilation.
Survivors, if you can even call them that, were left with permanent nerve damage, incontinence, chronic, unending agony. Even other professional torturers of the time looked at the Spanish donkey and said, that's excessive.
It was the nuclear option.
It was for when everything else failed. It was designed to break the absolute final resistance. If you were on the donkey, they weren't just asking questions anymore. They were breaking you for the sake of breaking you.
And finally, if Diego has gone through all of this, If he is still breathing, if he has confessed, or even if he hasn't. We reach the end of the line. Method number 8, the auto de fe again.
The act of faith. But this time, it's the execution.
But it's not just an execution, it's a festival.
It's a holiday. This is the culmination of the bureaucracy. The condemned are brought to the public square. Nobles are watching from elevated platforms. Street vendors are selling food. Children are running around.
It's a spectator sport.
It is the theater of power. Diego, wearing that yellow San Benito, is led to the stake.
And here's a detail from the sources that really surprised me. There was a mercy available even at the stake. A last-minute deal.
Yes. If you confessed at the very last second, if you kissed the cross and recanted, they would strangle you before they lit the fire.
You'd die by the garrote.
Which was considered a kindness, a mercy, because the alternative, if you refused to confess to the end, if you died impenitent, you were burned alive.
And not just burned, the sources are very specific about the greenwood.
This is a horrific detail. The executioners would deliberately build the pyre with greenwood wood that hasn't dried out.
Why? Why do that?
Because greenwood burns slowly. It smolders. It creates thick, choking smoke. It doesn't flare up instantly like dry kindling. This meant the victim would either suffocate slowly or, worse, literally cook slowly.
How long could it take?
It could take 20, 30, sometimes 40 minutes for the person to die.
40 minutes.
Screaming the entire time, while the crowd watched, while the scribes took notes.
And speaking of scribes, the documentation didn't end with the death, did it?
No, we have the receipts.
You mean actual receipts?
Actual financial ledgers. We know how much the rope for the garrote cost. We know how much the greenwood cost. We know the executioner's fee. The Inquisition treated human life as a line item in a budget.
That brings us to Section 5, the bureaucracy of evil. Because when you look at those receipts, you realize something terrifying.
These weren't monsters frothing at the mouth.
No. And that's the hardest part to swallow, I think. We like to imagine the inquisitors as sadists, as madmen.
But they were educated professionals. They were lawyers, theologians, physicians. They were doing a job.
They went home to their families, they ate dinner, they slept soundly after a day of operating the rack.
They discussed the efficiency of the toca versus the garrucha, the way we might discuss software tools today.
And the notary, the guy just writing it all down.
The banality of the notary is just chilling. Their job was to transcribe the sessions verbatim. So you have these official legal ledgers written in beautiful, careful calligraphy that contain the words, I, oh God, have mercy. They transcribe the screams.
It turns suffering into data.
It creates a distance. When you bureaucratize cruelty, you remove the individual responsibility. The notary isn't torturing, he's just writing. The physician isn't torturing, he's just checking the pulse. The inquisitor isn't torturing, he's just asking questions.
The executioner is just lighting the wood he was paid to buy.
Everyone is just following procedure.
And what about the victim's mind? We talked about the physical breaking point, but there's a psychological term for what happens to someone like Diego, right?
Learned helplessness.
Explain that for us.
It's a state where a person learns that they have no control over their suffering, no matter what they do. Tell the truth, lie, beg, remain silent, the pain comes. Eventually the mind just collapses. Resistance becomes futile.
So the confession becomes a reflex.
Exactly. It's not about truth anymore. Prisoners would confess to impossible things. Yes, I was in Toledo attending a secret rite, but you've never been to Toledo. I was there. I flew there. They would say anything just to make it stop.
And the Inquisition knew this. They had to.
They had to know. But again, the goal wasn't necessarily truth. It was conformity. It was control.
Which leads us to the legacy of this fear. Let's go back to Diego's house, to his wife, Isabel.
She's waiting for him. The evening comes, he doesn't return. The next day, he doesn't return. Eventually, the officers come, but not to bring news.
To seize the house.
They take everything. The inventories are meticulous. The cloth, the leather, the furniture, the spoons. Isabel and the children are thrown into the street with nothing. The inheritance is gone.
So even if Diego somehow survived, or even if he died, the family is completely destroyed.
And the neighbors are watching.
The same neighbors whose kids played with Diego's kids.
And now those neighbors are terrified. They see what happened to Diego. They know it started with a whisper about candles. So what do? They become hypervigilant. They watch their neighbors. They report anything suspicious to avoid being the next one taken.
It's the ultimate control mechanism. You don't need a soldier on every corner if the citizens are policing each other.
It destroyed trust. It destroyed community. It created a society where fear was the baseline of existence.
So as we wrap this up, What are we looking at in terms of the sheer scale, the numbers?
The Spanish Inquisition operated for 356 years, from 1478 all the way to 1834. Think about that span of time.
That's longer than the United States has existed.
Exactly. In that time, estimates suggest around 150,000 people were charged. Now, the execution numbers are debated, but they're likely between 3,000 and 5,000 people who were burned.
Some people might hear that and say, oh, only 5,000 in over 300 years. That's not as many as I thought.
And that's the illusion of small numbers. Because the goal wasn't to kill everyone. Dead people can't be fearful. The goal was to torture, humiliate, and release those 150,000 people. Many were broken on the rack, stripped of their property, put in a San Benito, and sent back out to live as ruined warnings to everyone else.
A living billboard for the Inquisition's power.
Precisely. The suffering of the survivors was more useful than the ashes of the dead.
And here's the uncomfortable question. The Inquisition officially ended in 1834. The Castillo de San Jorge is a museum now. But did the methods actually disappear?
The instruments are in museums. The ideas are not.
Connect the dots for us.
Look at the lineage. The rack. That's the ancestor of modern stress positions, forcing the body into painful postures for hours on end.
Polka.
We already said it. Waterboarding. It's the exact same physiological mechanism.
A heretic's fork.
Sleep deprivation. Keeping a prisoner awake for days until their cognitive defenses crumble.
And the San Benito. That public shaming.
The perp walk. Parading an accused person in handcuffs before the cameras, before they've even been tried.
Yeah.
Shaming them publicly to destroy their reputation before the facts are even heard.
The technology has evolved, but the psychology is identical.
The science of breaking a human being hasn't vanished. It just got new manuals.
That is a heavy thought to leave with.
It is, but it's a necessary one.
I want to leave our listener with one final image. The image of Diego Alvarez, a man who sold leather, a man who loved his kids, walking down that corridor.
The smell of wet stone. The flickering light.
He walks toward that door. He doesn't know about the rack or the donkey or the waterboarding yet. He just knows he's innocent. But waiting for him are educated men with a plan. Men who believe that pain is a process and that human beings are just raw material to be processed.
And that is the true horror. Not the tools themselves, but the permission structure that allowed ordinary men to use them.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for walking down that corridor with us.
Stay curious and stay critical.
We'll see you next time.